"Take her to the mountain before dawn breaks," the town elder commanded, as the trembling black girl was bound and led toward the treacherous peaks where the savage hermit dwelled. The townsfolk whispered she was worthless, a perfect sacrifice to appease whatever cursed their dying crops and livestock. They expected her bones to join countless others scattered across the mountain's shadows, her screams silencing their guilt. But the bearded recluse watching from his cabin window harbored secrets that could shatter their assumptions. This mysterious mountain man, exiled for truths no one would believe, faced a choice that would determine both their fates. The girl's survival threatened to expose a conspiracy running deeper than anyone imagined, one that could either destroy the town's corruption or damn them both to a shared grave. Will her encounter with the feared hermit lead to her salvation, or will the mountain claim another innocent soul? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The morning mist clung to Copper Falls like a burial shroud. Etta Tompkins bent over her sewing table, needle dancing through fabric with practiced precision. Outside her cramped workshop, the town stirred with familiar sounds of desperation. Another dead cow lay in the street, the third one this week. Farmers whispered about withered cornstalks and poisoned wells. Their eyes carried the wild look of people watching their world collapse. Etta kept her head down. 20 years in this town taught her that invisibility meant survival. The daughter of freed slaves learned early that drawing attention brought nothing but trouble. Heavy boots thundered past her window. Sheriff Amos Granger marched toward the church with a face carved from stone. Behind him trailed half the town, voices rising in panic. The church bell clanged 13 times. Emergency meeting. Etta's hands stilled on her work. Emergency meetings never meant good news for people like her. She pressed her ear to the thin wall separating her shop from the alley. Inside the church, Jeremiah Blackwood's voice boomed over the crowd. The silver-haired town elder commanded respect through fear and superstition. His words carried weight that crushed dissent. "The spirits demand payment," Blackwood declared. "Our ancestors knew the old ways. Blood for prosperity, life for life." Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Etta's stomach twisted. She had heard these speeches before. They always ended with someone suffering. "The mountain man grows hungry," Blackwood continued. "He sends his curse upon our land until we feed his appetite. We must offer what we can spare." What we can spare. Etta knew exactly what that meant, who that meant. The crowd's energy shifted. Desperate people sought easy solutions, someone expendable, someone whose disappearance would solve problems rather than create them. Sheriff Granger's voice cut through the whispers. "The council will decide by sunset." Etta backed away from the wall. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had witnessed this dance before in other towns, other times. The pattern never changed. Find a scapegoat. Dress up murder as salvation. The church doors burst open. Townspeople spilled into the street like water from a broken dam. Their faces carried the relieved look of people who found their sacrifice. Mrs. Henderson pointed directly at Etta's window. "She brings nothing but trouble. Always has." "Never contributed much anyway," another voice added. "Keeps to herself. Unnatural." The crowd's attention fixed on her small shop. Etta stepped back into the shadows. Her mind raced through impossible options. Running meant death in the wilderness. Staying meant death by decree. A softer voice cut through the harsh chorus. May Bell Carter pushed through the crowd, her tavern apron stained with flour and determination. "Y'all lost your minds," May Bell snapped. "Blaming spirits for your troubles. Next you'll be burning books and dancing naked under the moon." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Careful, woman. Defending the cursed makes you suspect." May Bell's jaw tightened, but she stepped back. Even her courage had limits. The crowd dispersed with their decision made. Etta would climb Thunder Ridge Mountain before dawn. The mountain man would claim his prize. The town would sleep easier. That evening, May Bell slipped through Etta's back door carrying a worn leather satchel. Her weathered face showed years of hard living and harder choices. "Got supplies," Maybelle whispered. "Water, dried meat, matches. Won't help much, but it's something." Etta accepted the bag with steady hands. Fear lived in her chest, but panic served no purpose now. "Why help me?" Maybelle's eyes softened. "Because someone should. Because this town forgot what decent means." She pressed a small, wrapped bundle into Etta's palm. "My grandmother's Bible. Can't read it myself, but maybe it'll bring comfort." Etta's throat tightened. The book felt warm against her fingers. She had taught herself to read simple words by studying discarded newspapers. This felt different. Sacred. "Thank you." Maybelle squeezed her shoulder. "The mountain man. They say he's 8 feet tall with claws for hands. They say he eats human flesh and talks to demons." "What do you say?" Maybelle considered this carefully. "I say men become monsters when the world treats them like monsters. But sometimes monsters remember what it means to be human." She slipped back into the darkness, leaving Etta alone with her thoughts and fears. The night stretched endless and cold. Etta packed her few belongings into Maybelle's satchel: a spare dress, her sewing kit, the precious Bible. Everything she owned in the world fit in one small bag. Dawn crept over the mountains like spilled blood. Sheriff Granger arrived with 2 deputies, their faces grim but determined. They escorted Etta through the silent streets toward Thunder Ridge. The mountain loomed above them, jagged peaks disappearing into low clouds. Somewhere up there lived the creature they called the Mountain Man. Somewhere up there, Etta would meet whatever fate awaited. At the mountain's base, Granger removed her bonds. "Path leads straight up. Don't try running. Nowhere to go but forward." The deputies mounted their horses without looking back. Granger hesitated for a moment, something almost like regret flickering in his eyes. "For what it's worth, girl, this ain't personal." Then he was gone, leaving Etta alone at the foot of Thunder Ridge. The path wound upward through pine trees and scattered boulders. Each step carried her further from the world she knew toward an uncertain destiny. The climb began. The mountain path twisted like a serpent's spine. Etta's legs burned with each upward step. Pine needles crunched beneath her worn boots as the air grew thinner and colder. Hours passed in grinding determination. The town below shrank to toy size, then disappeared entirely behind rocky outcroppings. Only wilderness remained, wild and indifferent to human suffering. Her water ran low by midday. The leather satchel felt heavier with each mile. Etta's breath came in sharp gasps that misted in the mountain air. A log cabin materialized through the trees ahead. Rough-hewn walls and a stone chimney spoke of permanence. This was no temporary shelter. Someone lived here by choice. Smoke curled from the chimney. The mountain man was home. Etta's vision blurred at the edges. Her body had reached its limits. The final 100 yards stretched like miles. Each step required conscious effort. She collapsed 20 feet from the cabin door. Her knees struck the rocky ground hard. The satchel tumbled from her numb fingers. The cabin door opened without sound. A figure stepped into the doorframe. Tall and broad-shouldered, but not the monster from town legends. No claws or fangs, just a man with weathered hands and careful eyes. Gideon Hawk studied the fallen girl with the patience of someone accustomed to solitude. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Exhaustion, not injury. He had seen enough of both to know the difference. He approached slowly, hands visible and empty. The girl's eyes tracked his movement with sharp intelligence despite her condition. Fear lived there, but also determination. She had climbed his mountain expecting death, but facing it with dignity. Gideon lifted Etta with surprising gentleness. She weighed nothing in his arms. Too thin, like most people who lived on the margins of society, he carried her inside his sanctuary. The cabin's interior defied every expectation. Books lined wooden shelves from floor to ceiling. Scientific instruments occupied a corner desk. Maps covered one entire wall, marked with careful notations and measurements. This was not a monster's lair. This was a scholar's refuge. Gideon placed Etta on his narrow bed and covered her with a wool blanket. He moved to the fireplace and added wood to the dying flames. Heat filled the small space gradually. Etta's eyes opened slowly. She expected to find herself in some nightmare den. Instead, she saw more books than existed in the entire town below. The scent of wood smoke and old paper filled her nostrils. "You're safe," Gideon said without turning from the fire. His voice carried the refined accent of education, not the growl of a savage. Etta struggled to sit up. Her body protested every movement. "Rest," Gideon advised. "The mountain nearly claimed you." He moved to a small kitchen area and returned with a tin cup of water. Etta accepted it with trembling hands and drank deeply. The water tasted clean and cold. "You know why they sent me," she said finally. Gideon nodded. "I know their superstitions, their need for someone to blame." He settled into a wooden chair across from the bed. His movements were deliberate and calm. A man comfortable with his own company. "They call you a monster. Men often become what others expect them to be," Gideon replied. "I chose a different path." Etta studied his face in the firelight. Lines around his eyes spoke of years spent outdoors, but also of reading by lamplight. His hands were calloused from physical labor, but ink-stained from scholarly work. "What are you really?" Gideon considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Trust had to be earned, especially from someone the world had already betrayed. "I was a professor once. Geology at Harvard University. Dr. Gideon Hawk, they called me then." The revelation hit Etta like cold water. A professor, a real scholar living in exile on Thunder Ridge. What happened? Pain flickered across Gideon's features, old wounds that never fully healed. "I discovered something my colleagues preferred to ignore. Evidence of their corruption. When I threatened to expose them, they fabricated charges against me. Theft of university property." His voice carried the bitter weight of injustice. Etta recognized that particular flavor of betrayal. "No one believed you. A man's word against an institution. My word against men who controlled reputations and careers. I became inconvenient, so they made me disappear." Gideon rose and moved to his bookshelf. He selected a leather-bound volume and returned to his chair. "I came here to continue my work away from their interference. The mountain provides everything I need: solitude, purpose, peace." Etta's eyes fixed on the book in his hands. Words covered the visible pages in neat columns. Her heart raced with recognition and longing. "You can read all of these?" Gideon followed her gaze to his collection. Hundreds of volumes on science, literature, history, and philosophy. The accumulated knowledge of a lifetime. "Reading opens every door the world tries to close," he said. "Knowledge is the one thing they cannot steal once you possess it." Etta's breathing quickened. She had dreamed of such treasures her entire life. Books that could teach her about places she would never see, and ideas she could never imagine. "I know some words," she admitted. "Taught myself from newspapers and handbills. But real books, proper learning, they never allowed that." Gideon leaned forward with sudden interest. Intelligence blazed in the girl's eyes like flame in darkness, raw potential waiting for opportunity. "Would you like to learn?" The question hung in the air between them. Everything changed in that moment. The sacrifice became a student, the monster became a teacher, death transformed into possibility. Etta's voice came out as barely a whisper. "More than anything." 3 months transformed everything. Etta's fingers moved across the pages of advanced mathematics with the confidence of natural talent unleashed. Numbers that once seemed like foreign symbols now revealed their secrets willingly. Gideon watched from his desk as she solved geological equations. Her progress amazed him daily. What took his university students months to grasp, she absorbed in weeks. The cabin had become a classroom. Charts covered the walls showing rock formations and mineral deposits. Etta's handwriting filled notebooks with observations about the mountain's geology and weather patterns. "The limestone here contains unusual mineral traces," Etta said, pointing to samples they had collected. different from what your textbooks describe. Gideon examined her notes with growing respect. Her attention to detail rivaled any scholar he had known. The girl possessed an analytical mind that formal education could not create, only nurture. Your seamstress training serves you well, he observed. Pattern recognition translates to scientific observation. Etta smiled at the connection. Her needlework had taught her to notice tiny variations in texture and color. Now she applied those same skills to rock samples and soil analysis. A soft knock interrupted their lesson. May Bell's familiar voice called from outside. "Anyone home who might appreciate some fresh bread?" Gideon opened the door cautiously. The tavern keeper stood on his threshold carrying a basket and wearing a knowing smile. "Figured you might have company," May Bell said, glancing past him toward Etta. "Brought extra provisions." She entered without invitation, her sharp eyes taking in the transformation. Books everywhere, scientific instruments in constant use. The sacrifice had become a student. "Town thinks you're dead, child," May Bell told Etta directly. "Been 3 months since anyone saw hide or hair of you." Etta looked up from her studies. The frightened girl who climbed the mountain had vanished. Confidence radiated from her posture and speech. "What news from below?" May Bell's expression darkened. "Problems getting worse, more livestock dead. Crops failing faster than ever. Blackwood claims the mountain man demands another sacrifice." The words hit like cold water. Etta's newfound security cracked at the edges. "Who?" "My niece, Sarah. She's only 16. Etta's hands clenched into fists. The cycle would continue. Another innocent life offered to superstition and fear. "We have to do something," Etta said. Gideon set down his geological charts. His scholarly mind engaged with the problem like a puzzle requiring solution. "Tell me about the town's troubles. Specific details, not general complaints." May Bell described the systematic destruction, cattle dying in particular pastures, wells turning foul in specific neighborhoods, crops withering in predictable patterns. Gideon pulled out a detailed map of the region. He marked locations as May Bell spoke. A pattern emerged that had nothing to do with curses. "The contamination follows water flow," he observed. "Something upstream is poisoning the supply." Etta studied the map with her trained eye for detail. Her finger traced the mountain streams that fed the town's wells and irrigation. "There," she pointed to a spot high up the ridge. "Water from there reaches every affected area." Gideon nodded grimly. "We need to investigate that location." The next morning, they climbed higher up Thunder Ridge than Etta had ever gone. The terrain grew rougher with each mile. Ancient pines gave way to bare rock and scattered boulders. They found the source near a hidden valley. Mining equipment lay scattered around a makeshift operation. Crude sluices channeled poisoned water directly into the mountain's natural drainage. "Illegal silver mining," Gideon confirmed after examining the setup, "using mercury to separate ore from rock. The runoff is killing everything downstream." Etta picked up fabric scraps near the mining site. Her seamstress eye recognized the expensive material immediately. "This cloth comes from finest wool," she said. "Only wealthy men in town could afford suits made from this." She tucked the samples into her collecting bag. Evidence mattered more than speculation. They spent hours documenting the illegal operation. Gideon's scientific training guided their investigation, while Etta's detailed observations captured crucial evidence. "Whoever runs this operation has significant resources," Gideon noted. "This equipment costs more than most miners could afford." Etta's journal filled with sketches and measurements. Every detail recorded with the precision her needlework had taught her. The return journey took them past other contamination sites. The pattern became undeniable. Someone was systematically poisoning Copper Falls for personal profit. Back at the cabin, they spread their evidence across Gideon's desk. Maps, water samples, fabric pieces, and detailed documentation painted a clear picture. "The town blames supernatural forces for natural crimes," Gideon said. "Someone benefits from their ignorance." Etta stared at the fabric samples. Her memory worked backward through recent sewing projects. She had made alterations for several wealthy customers in recent months. "Jeremiah Blackwood," she said suddenly. "I sewed buttons on a coat made from this exact material 2 months ago." The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. The town elder who preached about curses and sacrifices operated the illegal mine, destroying their community. He chose you specifically, Gideon realized. Your intelligence threatened his secret. Better to eliminate you than risk discovery. Etta felt anger burn in her chest, not the helpless rage of the powerless, but the focused fury of someone with knowledge and purpose. "We have to expose him." "Dangerous proposition," Gideon warned. "He controls the town through fear and superstition. Evidence alone might not be enough." Etta looked at her filled notebooks and gathered samples. Months of learning had given her tools she never possessed before. Knowledge, confidence, the ability to speak with authority. "Then we make it enough," she said. "Sarah's life depends on it." Thunder rumbled outside, but Etta no longer feared storms. She had learned to weather worse things than mountain weather. She had learned to fight back. The investigation consumed the next 2 weeks. Etta and Gideon mapped every stream, documented every contamination source, and traced the poison's path through Copper Falls like detectives solving a murder. Gideon's scientific equipment revealed mercury levels that would kill a horse. The illegal mining operation dumped toxic waste directly into the mountain's watershed. No supernatural curse could match human greed for destructive power. Etta's journals filled with precise measurements and detailed sketches. Her seamstress training proved invaluable for recording exact fabric patterns and stitching techniques found at the mining sites. Each piece of cloth told a story about its owner. They discovered 3 separate mining locations, all feeding poison into the town's water supply. The operation was larger and more systematic than either had imagined. Someone with serious resources and detailed knowledge of the terrain orchestrated this destruction. "Blackwood knows these mountains intimately," Gideon observed while studying their maps. "These mining sites are positioned perfectly to maximize contamination while remaining hidden from casual observation." Etta matched fabric samples to her memory of recent customers. The expensive materials painted a clear picture of wealthy involvement. Only 3 men in Copper Falls could afford such fine cloth. Jeremiah Blackwood topped that list. Her notebook contained detailed records of his clothing alterations, button replacements, hem adjustments, minor repairs that revealed intimate knowledge of his wardrobe. The fabric scraps from the mining sites matched perfectly. "We need more than circumstantial evidence," Gideon warned. "Accusations against powerful men require absolute proof." They spent days collecting water samples from specific locations. Gideon's chemistry knowledge allowed him to trace contamination patterns with scientific precision. The poison flowed directly from Blackwood's mining operations to the town's suffering. Etta documented everything with the thoroughness her needlework had taught her. Every sample labeled and cataloged, every observation recorded in clear handwriting that would convince any reasonable person. May Bell arrived unexpectedly one evening carrying grim news. Her face showed the strain of watching her community destroy itself through ignorance and fear. "They set the date," she announced without preamble. "Sarah goes up the mountain in 3 days, Sunday after church service." The timeline compressed around them like a closing trap. 3 days to expose years of systematic poisoning. 3 days to overcome superstition with science. "The whole town will gather for service," May Bell continued. "Blackwood plans some big ceremony before the sacrifice, making it official and holy." Etta felt opportunity crystallize in the announcement. Sunday service meant the entire community in one place. Everyone would hear their evidence simultaneously. "Perfect," she said with quiet determination. "We present our case then." Gideon raised concerns about the plan's dangers. "Challenging Blackwood publicly puts all of us at risk. He has too much to lose to surrender quietly." May Bell nodded grimly. "Man's got Sheriff Granger in his pocket. Most of the town council, too. They believe whatever he tells them." Etta studied her accumulated evidence with growing confidence. Months of education had given her tools she never possessed before. Knowledge carried its own authority when presented clearly and logically. "Then we make the truth impossible to ignore," she declared. They spent the remaining time preparing their presentation. Gideon organized the scientific evidence while Etta arranged the physical proof. Her attention to detail ensured nothing important would be overlooked. The fabric samples were mounted and labeled. Water samples arranged in clear progression showing contamination levels. Maps marked with precise locations and measurements. Everything documented with scholarly thoroughness. Etta practiced speaking their findings aloud. Public speaking terrified her more than the mountain climb. But Sarah's life depended on her courage. The frightened girl who was sent as sacrifice had evolved into someone who could fight back. "Remember your worth," Gideon advised during one practice session. "You possess knowledge they lack. That gives you power they cannot take away." His words carried weight beyond their immediate situation. Education had transformed Etta from victim to advocate. The same knowledge that threatened Blackwood could save Sarah. May Bell smuggled supplies from town for their planned revelation. She would create distraction during the church service, allowing Etta and Gideon to enter unnoticed. The element of surprise remained their greatest advantage. "Most folks are good people," May Bell assured them. "They just need someone to show them the truth. Blackwood controls them through fear and confusion." Saturday night arrived with unusual quiet, the calm before revelation. Etta reviewed her notes one final time while Gideon checked their scientific equipment. Everything had to work perfectly. They packed their evidence carefully in waterproof containers. The mountain weather could turn violent without warning, and their proof was too valuable to risk losing. "Once we do this, there's no going back," Gideon warned. "Blackwood will try to destroy us both." Etta looked at her filled journals and collected samples. Months of learning and investigation represented in careful documentation. The truth assembled piece by piece through determination and courage. "He already tried to destroy me once," she replied. "This time I'm ready." The night passed slowly. Both understood the magnitude of what they were attempting. Challenging established power required more than evidence. It demanded unwavering conviction and the courage to stand against mob mentality. Dawn approached with unusual beauty. Clear skies and gentle winds promised perfect weather for their revelation. Even nature seemed to support their cause. Etta dressed carefully in her best remaining clothes. Appearance mattered when challenging authority. She needed to project confidence and competence despite the town's preconceptions. Church bells began ringing across the valley. The service would start within hours. Sarah's fate hung in the balance, dependent on their ability to overcome ignorance with truth. The time for hiding had ended. The time for justice had begun. The church bells echoed across Copper Falls like a funeral dirge. Every soul in town gathered for what they believed would be their salvation. Another sacrifice to appease the mountain's hunger. Etta and Gideon moved through the forest shadows surrounding the church. Their evidence bags weighed heavy with proof that could shatter the town's carefully constructed lies. May Bell stood guard at the church's side entrance. Her signal would tell them when Blackwood began his ceremony. Timing meant everything in what they were about to attempt. Through the windows, they could see the packed congregation. Fear and desperation painted every face. These people genuinely believed they were saving their community through ancient ritual. Sarah sat in the front pew beside her weeping mother, 16 years old with intelligent eyes that reminded Etta of herself, another bright mind about to be snuffed out by ignorance. Blackwood rose to address his flock, silver hair gleaming in the lamplight, voice carrying the authority of assumed righteousness. He wore the expensive suit Etta had altered months ago. "Brothers and sisters," Blackwood intoned, "the mountain demands payment for our transgressions. The spirits grow restless. Our first offering pleased them briefly, but greater sacrifice is required." The congregation murmured agreement. Desperate people embraced desperate solutions when presented with sufficient drama. May Bell caught Etta's eye through the window. Now or never. The side door opened silently under May Bell's careful management. Etta stepped into the church's rear, her evidence bag clutched tight. Gideon followed with his scientific instruments. The old ways protected our ancestors, Blackwood continued, building toward his climax. Modern thinking brought this curse upon us. Only by returning to ancient wisdom can we find salvation. Etta walked down the center aisle with steady steps. Conversations died as congregants noticed the girl they thought was dead. Gasps rippled through the crowd like water over stones. Blackwood's voice caught mid-sentence. His face went pale as understanding dawned. The sacrifice had returned to haunt him. "Impossible," Sheriff Granger whispered from his front row seat. "She's been dead for months." Etta reached the altar and turned to face the congregation. The frightened seamstress who climbed Thunder Ridge had vanished completely. Education and purpose had forged her into something new. "I bring news from the mountain," Etta announced, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "The truth about your curse." Blackwood recovered his composure quickly. Years of manipulation had taught him to adapt to unexpected challenges. "Demon?" he declared with theatrical horror. "The mountain man sends his servant to deceive us. Do not listen to her lies." Several congregants made religious gestures to ward off evil. Superstition ran deeper than reason in minds trained to fear the unknown. Etta opened her evidence bag calmly. "I have proof of the real cause behind your suffering, scientific evidence that reveals the true source of contamination." She held up the first water sample. Clear liquid in a labeled glass container. "This water comes from the mountain springs above your town, pure and clean as nature intended." The second sample came out dark and fouled. "This water comes from below the illegal mining operations, poisoned with mercury and other toxic chemicals." Gideon stepped forward with his maps and measurements. The congregation's attention divided between skepticism and curiosity. Evidence had power that superstition could not easily dismiss. "The contamination follows predictable patterns," Gideon explained, spreading his charts across the altar. "Every affected area receives water from streams that pass these mining locations." Blackwood's eyes flashed with rage barely contained beneath his pious mask. More deception from the mountain demon. Scientific lies to corrupt your souls. Etta produced the fabric samples with quiet confidence. Her seamstress expertise made the evidence unshakable. "These cloth pieces were found at the mining sites," she announced, holding up the expensive wool. "I sewed buttons on a coat made from this exact material for Jeremiah Blackwood." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Several congregants leaned forward to examine the fabric more closely. May Bell stood up in the middle pews. "Girl knows her textiles better than anyone in this town. If she says that cloth came from Blackwood's coat, then it did." "Lies!" Blackwood shouted, his composure cracking under pressure. "The girl is a liar and a demon. She brings corruption to poison your minds against God." But doubt had entered the equation. Etta's calm presentation contrasted sharply with Blackwood's growing hysteria. The congregation began choosing sides based on who seemed more credible. Sheriff Granger stood slowly. His weathered face showed the internal struggle between duty and convenience. Blackwood had always made his job easier by providing simple answers to complex problems. "These are serious accusations," Granger said carefully. "Got any more proof than fabric scraps and water samples?" Etta opened her journals with practiced efficiency. Months of careful documentation filled page after page with precise observations and measurements. "Complete records of the illegal mining operation," she announced. "Locations, equipment inventories, contamination patterns, and timeline correlation with your town's problems." She handed the journals to several congregants for examination. Her clear handwriting and detailed sketches impressed even the skeptical. This was not the work of an uneducated girl. "Where did you learn to write like this?" Mrs. Henderson asked with genuine amazement. "The mountain man taught me," Etta replied. "He is Dr. Gideon Hawk, former professor of geology at Harvard University, exiled for refusing to participate in academic corruption." The revelation struck like lightning. A real professor living on Thunder Ridge, not a monster, but a scholar driven into exile by the same forces threatening Sarah. Blackwood saw his control slipping away. Desperation made his next words sharp and vicious. You fools believe a worthless girl over your spiritual leader? She brings nothing but trouble. Always has. Send her back to the mountain where she belongs. The familiar prejudice rang hollow against Etta's demonstrated competence. Education had armed her with weapons that hatred could not defeat. The congregation erupted in heated debate. Voices rose as neighbors chose sides between evidence and authority. Blackwood's desperate words had revealed his true character to people who once trusted him blindly. May Bell stood up in her pew with fire in her eyes. That girl climbed your mountain expecting to die. She came back with knowledge that could save us all. Maybe it's time we listened instead of condemned. Other voices joined her support. Farmers whose crops had withered. Families who lost livestock. People tired of watching their world collapse while their leader demanded more sacrifices. Sheriff Granger examined Etta's journals with growing amazement. The detailed documentation impressed his practical mind. This was real evidence, not superstitious speculation. These mining locations, he said, pointing to her maps. I can verify them myself, right up there today if needed. Blackwood's face flushed red with cornered rage. You trust the word of an ignorant girl over decades of faithful service? I have guided this community through countless hardships. By demanding human sacrifices, Etta replied with quiet dignity. By blaming innocent people for crimes you committed yourself. She opened her evidence bag one final time. The most damning proof lay wrapped in cloth at the bottom. Her seamstress eye had caught what others missed. This button fell from someone's coat at the largest mining site, she announced, holding up the distinctive silver piece. Hand-carved with initials JB. I sewed it onto Jeremiah Blackwood's winter coat 3 months ago. The congregation fell silent. Physical evidence that placed their respected leader at the scene of contamination. No superstition could explain away such concrete proof. Blackwood lunged forward desperately. Lies and planted evidence. The demon seeks to destroy me because I threaten her master's power. But his theatrical performance had lost its audience. Too much truth had been revealed for denial to work anymore. The people of Copper Falls were simple, not stupid. Dr. Gideon Hawk stepped forward with scientific authority. I have spent months analyzing the contamination patterns. The illegal mining operations are systematically poisoning your water supply for personal profit. This is environmental crime, not supernatural curse. His educated voice carried weight that superstition could not match. A Harvard professor commanded respect even in frontier communities. Why should we believe you? Demanded one of Blackwood's remaining supporters. Gideon produced his university credentials from a leather portfolio, official documents bearing seals and signatures, proof of his academic standing before exile. Because I have dedicated my life to truth, he replied simply. Because knowledge serves humanity, while ignorance serves only those who profit from it. Sheriff Granger made his decision with visible reluctance. Years of taking easy orders from Blackwood had corrupted his sense of justice, but evidence demanded action regardless of personal convenience. Jeremiah Blackwood, you are under arrest for fraud, environmental destruction, and conspiracy against this community. The words echoed through the church like thunder. Several congregants gasped at seeing their former leader reduced to common criminal. Blackwood's composure shattered completely. You cannot arrest me. I am chosen by God to lead this community. These people need my guidance. What they need is clean water and honest leadership, Etta said with calm authority, both of which you have denied them through greed and manipulation. May Bell pushed through the crowd towards Sarah, who sat weeping with relief in the front pew. The 16-year-old girl would live to see another sunrise. It's over, child, May Bell whispered, embracing Sarah tightly. No more sacrifices. No more fear. The congregation began dispersing with mixed emotions. Relief that their problems had a solution. Shame that they had been deceived so completely. Anger at wasted time and unnecessary suffering. Some approached Etta with gratitude and apologies. Others avoided eye contact, embarrassed by their willingness to sacrifice an innocent life. What happens now? Asked Mrs. Henderson, the same woman who once called Etta worthless. Etta looked around the church that had condemned her to death. These people had shown her cruelty, but also the capacity for change when confronted with truth. "The mining operations will be shut down," she replied. "Your water supply will recover naturally within months. Your crops and livestock will thrive again." "Will you stay and help us rebuild?" The question hung in the air with genuine hope. Etta had proven herself capable of leadership and worthy of respect. The town needed her skills and knowledge, but Etta's transformation had taught her the value of choice. Freedom meant the power to determine her own destiny. "My place is not here," she said gently. "Too much has happened for me to simply return to the way things were." Gideon approached with understanding in his eyes. "The Territorial Survey Office has offered me a position mapping the Western Territories. They need skilled assistants." "What about teaching?" Etta asked, remembering her dreams of education and sharing knowledge. "The new settlements need schools," he replied. "Teachers who understand that learning belongs to everyone, regardless of background or appearance." The vision crystallized with perfect clarity. Etta saw herself in front of a classroom filled with eager faces. Children of all colors and circumstances learning together without prejudice or limitation. "When do we leave?" Within a week, their preparations were complete. Maybelle packed supplies for their journey while Sheriff Granger finalized Blackwood's charges. The illegal mining equipment would be destroyed and the contaminated sites cleaned. Sarah visited their cabin before departure. The girl who nearly died as a sacrifice brought flowers and gratitude. "Thank you for saving my life," she said simply. "Save others when your turn comes," Etta replied. "That is how the world truly changes." The morning of departure dawned bright and clear. Etta and Gideon loaded their wagon with books, instruments, and dreams of building something better. Copper Falls would heal from its wounds. The people would learn to think rather than simply fear. Progress would replace superstition through patient effort. Their wagon rolled toward the horizon where new communities waited for schools and teachers. Behind them, Thunder Ridge Mountain stood eternal and peaceful. Etta had climbed that mountain as a condemned sacrifice. She descended as an educated woman ready to transform the world through knowledge and compassion. The journey toward justice never truly ended. It simply found new roads and fresh destinations.